I've never been here before. How am I supposed to break this place down? Hello again. Today we are at a lake that I have never fished from my kayak before. I will be honest, I tried fishing it a couple times, well, ice fishing this year, but like you know, I'm not very good at ice fishing. Where are the fishies? So I didn't have very much luck, but today it's open water and we're gonna take out the kayak and we're gonna see if we can break this thing down. But I thought this would be a great opportunity to teach you how I like to try to break a new lake down. You know, before I even get in the water, the first couple things that I'm gonna do is one, I am gonna look and see what's the water clarity like. And today I see that it's pretty dang clear. The other thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take into account, what is the weather doing? Today it is very overcast. And then the last thing that I'm gonna do is, what's the season? You know, it's the dead of summer. So that's gonna all start to get me thinking, what's the pattern going to be? So because of those conditions, some of my thoughts are, because it's so cloudy, these fish might be roaming a little bit, chasing bait. I think I could probably throw a topwater in this clear water and work it fast. That's probably what I'm gonna try, but there's multiple things that could work today. But in an effort to make today's video relatively short and brief for you, I am going to hop on the water and show you kind of what I do once I get on the water. The first things that I'm gonna do when I get on a lake is just paddle around and kind of get a feel for what it looks like, what kind of vegetation's in the water, what kind of laydowns are in the water, so on and so forth. And then after I kind of get a feel for that, that's when I'll just start fishing. So at first when I was on the bank, I thought that the water was pretty clear, but after getting out here, it appears that the water is actually pretty stained. Now, as you guys know, I don't have a fish finder, so it's a little bit more challenging for me to understand what the layout of the lake is. As previously noted, I think a topwater is gonna work pretty well this morning. I could be wrong, but it's worth a shot. One of my biggest tips for you guys though, is to throw a confidence bait that you know you can catch a fish on to start. And that's a good way to search for fish. And then once you start catching a few, you have to have the discipline to be able to switch to something that you think is gonna actually outperform your confidence bait. So for me, a lot of times I start with a Ned rig and just try to figure out if there are fish in the area that I'm in. Now, a lot of times cloud cover, whether it's the summer or spring or whatever, the cloud cover can spread fish out and they're not gonna hold as tight to cover because they don't necessarily need the shade as much. So that's where moving baits like topwaters, swim jigs, chatterbaits, those are gonna probably perform best. Now, obviously this can be a little bit of a strenuous process and you're gonna fish a lot of water before you get bit. But I think the thing to remember is you don't wanna necessarily fish one pattern to start. You fish a lot of different patterns to start. And then once you start to catch a couple fish, you can start to replicate that. And that's gonna cut a lot of the time out of the process. So I just threw a spook all around this main lake piece of structure and it had some shallow grass and a little bit dingier water. I think what I'm ruling out is actually the topwater because I'm not seeing a lot of topwater activity. I think what I'm gonna go ahead and do is switch to a chatterbait to try to continue to cover water, but at the same time, I'm gonna have a little bit more confidence that this is gonna be a bait that's gonna produce for me. So right now I'm just fishing some scattered vegetation on the interior side of some main lake structure. A lot of vegetation around as well. Makes it a little bit harder, a little bit more challenging when you're fishing lakes that everything looks so good in. That's where you just have to cover a lot of water. And then once you catch a fish, you gotta break it down and figure out why did that fish bite in the first place. So I fished some main lake structure. I started to fish some pockets on the interior side of the main lake structure, and now I'm actually getting to these docks. And what's great about these docks is actually there's a channel swing here, so there's a drop off in front of the dock. So it might be 3 feet up shallow, but it's deeper out here. How do I know that? I actually talked to a guy, but at the same time, I'm looking around and I'm scoping it out. And you can tell, if you really, really pay close attention, you can kind of see where water gets a little bit darker. You can start to see a little bit of those drop off lines. That being said, it's a little bit harder with this dingier water, but it has cleared up just a little bit, which gives me high hopes that this area could be actually pretty productive. I'm gonna go ahead and downsize to a small swim bait on a Ned rig, and I'm just gonna see if I can start to pluck a few to gain a little bit of confidence. Because of these overcast skies, I'm gonna go ahead and fish this swim bait on the Ned rig to fish a little bit faster while still presenting it a little bit more finesse than I was. I don't think these fish are gonna be positioned right on the docks because they don't really need the shade today, but I think they'll be roaming around a little bit. All right, just caught my first fish there, and it was actually right against the seawall, as shallow as you can get. So that tells me something. I don't know if they're all gonna be that shallow. There's obviously a little bit smaller fish, but it builds my confidence just a bit. There's another fish. He's going crazy. Oh my gosh. He popped off. He was good. Dude, the thing is, these fish are so shallow, and I'm figuring that out. And it's all because of just trial and error. That was a good fish. I first thought it was small, but he was, that really bums me out, guys. But what I think I've realized is that these fish are cruising around right up on the bank. And so I'm gonna start hitting it really, really shallow, and I think that's gonna pay off. He ain't big, but he's a fish. Obviously not a big fish, but there's something that was the same about each of the 3 fish that I've hooked. They've all been as shallow gets. I'm talking 6 inches of water, and they're on a channel swing bank. That to me sounds like some sort of pattern. Because I wanted to keep today's video pretty short, I'm gonna go ahead and close it off there. But guess what? I'm gonna keep fishing, and I'm actually gonna make a separate video, so stay tuned for that. Hey, if you're new to my channel, guess what? I make like 2 or 3 videos a week, so click the red subscribe button below to stay tuned for future episodes, as well as that bell. Click the bell as well. Overall, the moral of the story is this. 1, when you go to a new body of water, you can't expect to just absolutely wreck them the first time. But if you can learn a little bit about the lake the first time, maybe you can return and then wreck them. And then 2, trust your gut. And once you do catch a fish, try to replicate it. If you can't replicate your first fish, that fish could just be a fluke. So then keep trying new patterns. The other thing to remember is that patterns can change throughout the day. But I'm gonna tell you this, if you can start to replicate a bite, then all of a sudden you're gonna start smashing fish. At least that's how it works for me. Anyways, have yourself a fantastic day. We'll check you later.